Welcome you all for this COVID Pulse Pediatric Acute Care Training for the in context of COVID-19 preparedness by PICU CMC Vellore Initiative. Thank you for your continued support and feedback. So especially from the peripheral hospitals and the mission hospitals, thank you for joining. And today we have an important topic which is useful in your day-to-day practical aspects in ICU or in any emergencies or in HTU in overall in an acute care setting. That's medications used for critical children and drug arrest. And we have reputed experts speaking on that, and our moderators will introduce them, Dr. Reshma and Sujit. Today's moderators, I'm really happy to introduce Dr. Reshma Aramanatka. She is a consultant pediatric intensivist from Naruvi Hospital, Vellore. She did her MBBS from Bangalore and MD from reputed PGI, Chandigarh. And she did this postdoctoral fellowship in pediatric intensive care from Tamil Nadu MGR University. And she did a DM Pediatric Critical Care from PGA Chandigarh. And she worked with us as assistant professor at CMC Vellore in our ICU. She's actively involved in teaching and training, especially simulation based, and she's published papers in reputed journal and contributed to IAP ALS manual. Thank you, Reshma, and welcome you to moderate this session. We are
Thank you,
happy to
sir.
have you. And we
Thank
have
you.
another moderator, Dr. Sujit Kumar. He's a pediatric intensivist from Paramita Children's Hospital at Hyderabad. He did his MBBS from Gandhi Medical College, Hyderabad, DNB Peds from NICE Hospital, Hyderabad, and he did this Indian Diploma in Pediatric Critical Care Medicine of the IAP College of Pediatric Critical Care and the postdoctoral fellowship in pediatric intensive care at CMC. So he worked with us as fellow for 2 years, and he's become intensivist at Paramita Children's. Welcome, Sujit. Happy to have you here. Thank you, both of you. And I request Reshma and Sujit to moderate this session and to introduce the speakers and the topic. Over to you guys.
Thank you, sir. I take great pleasure in introducing the three speakers of today's session. Primum non nocere, or first do no harm, is one of the fundamental elemental principles of healthcare. We should not do any harm to the patient who is coming sick. And especially in PICU and an acute care setting, where a lot of time-sensitive interventions are done, there's a high chance of errors happening. So we should know how to safely deliver healthcare to the patient. So in this, the drug preparations, the method to correctly prepare and administer the drugs is very important to be known. And for giving us a priming on this, we have two professors from the nursing side, Mrs. Mary Johnson, who's the professor and head of pediatric nursing at CMC Vellore, and Mrs. Ruma Nayak, who's also a professor of pediatric nursing at CMC. We also have a talk by Dr. Shiva Vyasam, who's an assistant professor in PICU, and he has given previously lectures in this session. I take great pleasure in introducing all the three of them. The session will start with Shiva's talk on preparation of drugs, that is sedation, analgesia, and inotropic medications. And I invite Shiva to present his lecture.
Thank you, Reshma. Thank you, sir. So as Reshma has introduced, good afternoon, everyone. So today I'm going to present about the common drugs, what we use in our ICU.
Hello.
And along with me, Sister
Hello.
Jansi and Mary's sister is also there. So they will be also be there. They will be telling how to, from the nursing perspective, how to load the drugs and all those things. So I will just talk about the most common drugs used in our ICU, like inotrope, sedation, and neuromuscular blocker. So we will start with a case. It's a 5-year-old child, 20 kilos, admitted with COVID pneumonia. He worsened to have respiratory failure. Distress initially was progressed to failure. His saturation was only 88 to 90% on NIV, with settings of 12/8 of PEEP and 100% FiO2. So you want to intubate the child. So what all drugs you want to load and keep it ready. So we have so much of armatorium of drugs available in our ICU. So, but we have to choose it wisely and depending on the condition for what we are intubating. So Suppose if you have taken ketamine, the dose is 0.5 to 1 milligram per kg per dose, maximum of 60 milligram per dose you can give. Coming to the fentanyl, it's 1 to 2 mics per kg per dose, maximum of 50 to 100 mics. And midazolam, it's 0.1 to 0.2 mg per kg per dose, maximum of 6 milligram per dose. You should try to avoid in hypotension and especially in the liver failure. And atracurium, it's 0.3 to 0.6 mg per kg per dose stat. And cisatracurium 0.1 mg per kg per dose, and vecuronium 0.1 mg per kg per dose, and propofol is 1 to 2.5 mg per kg stat doses. And the propofol is like a pure sedative and hypnotic. It don't have any analgesic effect, short of life, mainly used for the sedation, but side effects of hypertension is there. And always, this is like a physiologically difficult airway. Child is having severe hypoxia, so child may arrest during the intubation. So you have to keep ready adrenaline. So 0.1 ml per kg of 1:10,000. And atropine sometimes may be needed. So 0.02 mg per kg per dose, maximum of 0.6 mg. So what all drugs you will choose? These all things will be available in our ICU. So for this child, I may choose 0.5 to 1 mg per kg per dose of ketamine and fentanyl, 1 to 2 mics per kg per dose, and small dose of atracurium to paralyze the child. So these ketamine, fenta, and atra might be the choice of sedation for intubation this child. So I will just ask, and adrenaline also I will keep it ready because this is like a physiologically difficult airway. In case child is having any hypoxic brady, so I want to prevent that arrest. Okay, so the pre-intubation cardiac arrest. So adrenaline I will keep it ready. So I just want to ask Jhansi's sister. Jhansi's sister, can you just explain how you will load the drugs and what is it like? Is there any formula, easy way to develop it?
We have different sizes of syringes. This is 1 cc, otherwise we called tuberculin syringe, which has 100 divisions. Next one is 2 cc, that is 2 ml. Each ml will be 10 divisions. This is 5 cc syringe. Each ml is 5 divisions. This is 10 cc syringe. Each ml will be 2 divisions. This is 20 cc syringe. Each ml will be 1 division. This is 50 cc syringe. Each ml will be 1 division. This can be used for infusions. So the formula to calculate the drug is what we want by what we have per ml into amount of solution into number of divisions per ml.
You want to tell with example, sister, with adrenaline?
Adrenaline available form is this injection adrenaline 1 ml contains 1 milligram. This is 1 in 1000 concentration. Recommended dose for resuscitation. When child is arrested, if we want to administer adrenaline, we need to make it as 1 in 10,000. So prescribed dose is 3 milligram. So I think resuscitation, we need to take 1 ml of adrenaline in 9 ml of normal saline, so which gives us 1 in 10,000. From this, we take 0.1 ml per kg. If child is, for example, if child is 10 kg child, we can give 1 ml, 1 in 10,000. We can repeat for every 3 to 5 minutes during cardiac arrest.
Sure, sister.
If you want to take 3 mg, so 3 mg is 3 ampule we need to take. Each ampule is milligram, so we need to take 3 ml. If for resuscitation, we can use the 5 cc. 5 cc has each ml is 5 divisions. So what we want is 3 milligram. The number of what we have is 1 milligram into number of divisions per ml is 5. So we need to take 15 divisions, that is 3 ml by using 5 cc syringe. So every 3 to 5 minutes we can read the dosage.
Thank you, sister. What about the other common drugs like ketamine?
Other common drugs used for induction is injection ketamine, injection fentanyl, injection midazolam, and atrecurium. Injection ketamine available form is 2 ml ampule. Vial also it is available. That is 10 ml vial. This is ampule. What we have is ampule. This is 2 ml ampule. Each ml contains 50 milligram. So according to the age of the child or weight of the child, we can dilute. If it is small child, we can take 1 ml of this, that is 50 milligram plus 9 ml of ketamine. So what is given is 1 ml plus 4 ml of water for injection. So each ml will give you 10 milligram. For example, if child is 20 kg child, so if we want to administer 20 milligram, we can use ICC syringe. So each ml will be 10 milligram. So you can take 2 ml. So what we want is 20 divided by what we have is 10 milligram into number of divisions per ml. That is 5 divisions. So we can take 10 divisions from the 5 cc syringe. Next one is injection fentanyl. That I don't have because that is a narcotic drug. I was not able to bring. Injection fentanyl available form is one is 50 microgram per ml. 2 ml ampule also available and 10 ml ampule also available. 2 ml ampule is that is 100 microgram. 10 ml ampule is 500 microgram. If prescribed is 20 mics, we need to take fentanyl 2 ml. 2 ml of fentanyl, that is 1 ampule, and the 8 ml of water for injection. So each ml will be 10 microgram. What we want is 20 microgram. What we have is 10 microgram. The number of divisions per ml is 5. So 20 divided by 10 is 2. 2 into 5 is 10. So 10 divisions of 5 cc you can take fentanyl. Next one is midazolam. Midazolam available form is 5 milligram per ml. We have 2 forms. One is vial form, that is each ml. 1 ml contains 1 milligram. This ampule 1 ml contains 5 milligram. So we need to dilute this. We need to take 1 ml of midazolam and 4 ml of water for injection. Each ml will be 1 milligram. The dosage is 0.1 milligram per kg. So according to the weight, we can calculate and take the midazolam. This is atrecurium. Ampule is available 25 milligram in 2.5 ml. So we need to 2.5 ml of atrecurium plus 2.5 ml of water for injection. Each ml will be 5 milligram. The actual dosage is 0.3 to 0.5 milligram per kg. So according to the weight, we can calculate and take the atrecurium. Next one is bacranium. Bacranium available is powder form. So this is 10 mg vial. You can take 10 ml of water for injection and dilute. Each ml will be 1 milligram. So from this, we need to take the prescribed dosage. Another one is propofol. Propofol no need to dilute. This available form is 10 mg per ml. So just like that, we can take and connect infusion. Injection adrenaline already I have explained. Next one is injection atropine. Available form is 1 ml ampule that contains 0.6 milligram. So we need to take 1 ml of injection atropine and 5 ml of water for injection. Each ml will be 0.1 milligram. So from this we can calculate and take the injection atropine.
Thank you very much, sister, for telling us how to load the things, mainly the practical aspects, the divisions and all the things. Thank you very much. So I just want to start with sedation and analgesic infusions, what we will do. So why we need actually sedation and analgesia and ICU? Mainly it's for patient comfort and to facilitate the patient ventilator synchrony and to optimize the oxygenation and to avoid the other consequences like delirium and delusional memories, which may influence the long-term psychological effect. So the child which we have seen, you have intubated the child using ketamine, fentanyl, atracurium. So you want to start on sedation or analgesic and analgesic. So what all options do you have and how will you load it? So we have midazolam, as sister mentioned. This is 5 milligram in 1 ml. Midazolam will come. It's each ml that costs around 15 rupees. So what is the sedation dose is there? Seizure dose is there. So just remember, sedation dose is 0.5 milligram per kg in 50 ml of NS or 5% dextrose. So each 1 ml per hour will give 10 mics per kg per hour. The range is 10 to 40 mics per kg per hour. So depending on the child's condition and sedation score, you can go up on the thing. Suppose if you intubated the child for the status, you want to keep like a seizure dose. So you have to give 6 times of it. So you can see here 0.5 mg per kg you are giving here. Instead of that, you have to give 3 milligram per kg in 50 ml of NS and 5% dextrose. Each 1 ml per hour will give it's 1 mic per kg per minute. This is like 60 mics per kg per hour. 6 times. So this is 60 mics per kg per hour or 1 mic per kg per minute. Its available dose is 5 milligram in 1 ml ampule. Solution form is available. So the adverse effects like respiratory depression, hypotension, all these things are there. So suppose 20 kg child is there, you want to start at 20 mics per kg per hour. So you need to write the order. So how you will write? So injection midazolam. So you can write 20 milligram, 20 kg child. So you can write 1 mg per kg. That is like double strength. Like 1.5 mg per kg, 1 ml per hour will give 10 mics. We want here 20 mics per kg. So you can write 1 mg per kg. So that is 20 mg in 50 ml of NS or 5% dextrose at 1 ml per hour. And 1 ml per hour will give 20 mics per kg per hour. So suppose child with status epilepticus you are intubated. So you want to start on seizure dose midas. So that will be 3 milligram per kg. So 3 into 20 kilo child. So 60 milligram in 50 ml NS or 5D. Each 1 ml will give 1 mic per kg per minute or 60 mics per kg per hour. Okay, so this thing she already had explained. So how we will take. So this is like 20 milligram. If you want to load, you have to, each ampule is 5 milligram. So for 20 milligram, you have to take 4 ampules of midazolam, and the other 46 ml can be NS or 5D, and you have to run it 1 ml per hour. And same thing for 60 mg, you have to take 12 ampules, and the remaining will be your NS or dextrose and run it at 1 ml per hour. Okay, this is for midazolam. And for the morphine, analgesic dose is usually 0.5 mg per kg in 50 ml of NS or 5D. Same thing, like range is 10 to 40 mics per kg per hour, and this available in 10 milligram in 1 ml ampule. It's solution form, preservative free. It costs around 23 rupees. So how you will write for a 20 kg child? You want to start at 10 mics per kg per hour. So you start with 10 milligram. So this is 0.5 mg per kg. So 0.5 into 20, that is 10 milligram in 50 ml NS. Run it at 1 ml per hour, which will give 10 mics per kg per hour. Okay. So the same, you are ordered to load. So what else you can do? So what you want to combine and write sometimes midas and morphine infusion. So you can combine and write. How you can write for a 20 kg child? You can put midazolam 20 milligram, that is 1 mg per kg. Each ml will give 20 mics per kg per hour, and 0.5 mg per kg morphine. Depending on how much you want sedation and analgesia, you can write. So how much each 1 ml per hour will give midazolam? This is 1 mg per kg of midazolam. So it will give 20 mics per kg per hour of midazolam, whereas morphine, it is 0.5 mg per kg. It will give 10 mics per kg per hour. And just remember, never write seizure dose midazolam along with morphine, because seizure dose midazolam, it should go in a separate line, because you want, the child is intubated for status, and if you're doing EEG, if it's showing non-convulsive status, you may have to go up on the midazolam. Okay, if midas and morphine combinedly, if you give at that point of time, the morphine dose also will be increased. So always try to put seizure dose midazolam, that is 3 mg per kg in 50 ml NS, in a separate line. Okay? Because as titration of midazolam will be difficult later. Again, the same example, how to prepare this. So this I'm skipping. So what are the other options you have? We have already told, if child is hypotensive, severe cardiogenic shock, or in liver failure, you may not give the midazolam. So in those children, you can give fentanyl. Okay, that can be like analgesic, like 1 to 5 mics per kg per hour for non-ventilated, especially in NIV children. You can use that. For ventilated children, you can go to 5 to 10 mics per kg per hour. This, as already Sister Jansi said, is available at 500 mics in 10 ml or 1000 mics in 20 ml. So for a 20 kg child, you want to start on 5 mics per kg per hour. How can we write the order? So this is all like simple calculations you can do. There is no hard and fast rule or any formula for it. So you can just see 1000 mics you want to dilute. So 1000 mics already it contains 20 ml. So you have to add another 5 ml of NS. So total will be 25 ml. So each ml will be 40 mics. Okay, for 20 kg child, 1 ml will be like 2 mics per kg per hour. But you want to give 5 mics per kg per hour. So 1 ml is giving only 2 mics. You want 5 mics. So you have to start at 2.5 ml per hour. Okay. So that is all the titration, that permutation combinations only. So for 10 kilo child, you want to give lesser value. So you put 500 mics undiluted. That is 10 ml of the fentanyl will be there remaining. So the 10 ml you can just run it. So that each one ml will give 50 mics. So this child, if you want to start 5 mics per kg per hour for 10 kilo child, 1 ml will be given 5 mics per kg per hour. So you start at 1 ml per hour, that will give 5 mics per kg per hour. But only thing, it will last only for 10 hours. So you have to see, depending on the child's weight and how long you are going to give fentanyl, depending on that, you have to write the fentanyl order. There is no formula like 0.3 mg per kg or 0.6 mg per kg, nothing like that. Just remember, depending on the child's weight and how long you want to give, you titrate your medication and the order for fentanyl. But remember, the dose is 5 to 10 mics per kg per hour for ventilated child. So how you will prepare again? Here already we have told, suppose this is the order written by the doctor to start at 5 mics per kg per hour. We need to start at 2.5 ml per hour. So you see available form of injection fentanyl, 50 mics per ml is there, and you take 20 ml, that is 1000 mics of injection fentanyl, and the remaining 5 ml will be your NS. Okay, so total run it at 2.5 ml per hour. Okay, so that's what we will write. So what all things you will look in, because the sedation in a ventilated child, it's like a goal directed. Okay, there is Richmond agitation sedation score is there, which usually this any sedation we are giving, we need to have some therapeutic endpoint and some endpoint so that we know whether we administered the correct dose of whatever we are giving or not. So most patients desirable is 0 to -2. Okay, so that is where we will try to keep the children when the child is all sedated, and try to avoid the benzodiazepines, and sometimes daily wake-up trial is indeed needed, and restart the sedation at half dose, non-respiratory depressants like dexmedetomidine, and watch for withdrawal symptoms. There is some bundle known as ABCDEF bundle, is one way to align and coordinate care, especially to prevent the delirium and other things. Especially only thing here, A means assess, prevent and manage the pain, both spontaneous awakening trial and spontaneous breathing trial, choice of analgesia, what we are choosing, and sedation and delirium and early mobility and family engagement and empowerment. So these all things are needed to prevent this iatrogenic withdrawal, because you are giving these children long time drugs like opioids, benzodiazepines. If you're giving any child, they will develop the drug tolerance and they will develop physiological dependencies. So suddenly if you stop them, so they will obviously develop some symptoms that is called as withdrawal symptoms. You can see sweating, mydriasis, GI symptoms they can have. Okay, all these things. So how can we monitor? In ICU, we have something known as withdrawal assessment tool. There is recently VAT2 is also there. So it mainly estimates how the severe is the opioid and benzodiazepine withdrawal in children. There is some no, yes things are there which we have to see. Always remember the trend is important. How is the withdrawal trend is important. So mainly thing here you can see here GI symptoms are there, some pre-stimulus observation, any tremors, sweatings, after stimulus, they started to touch muscle tone, and how time to gain to calm state. All these things are there. So what is the importance of this score? Whoever having scores of less than 3, the weaning may take up to 6 days, and whoever having score more than 3, the weaning may take 10 days for them to wean. Okay, so that is the main importance thing. And there are some guidelines given, especially in Rogers textbook. So if the child is on opioids or benzodiazepine for 3 to 5 days, how you have to taper them. So you initiate the withdrawal assessment tool, which I already showed, every 4 to 6 hours, and continue for 1 to 2 days after stopping all the drugs. But how you will taper? If the child is on for 3 to 5 days, you taper by 20% of pre-tapered dose every day. And if any time withdrawal symptoms develop, stop weaning for 24 hours. Okay? If withdrawal symptoms do not improve or worsen, you may have to increase the opioid or benzodiazepine to previous dose, or you have to consider adding clonidine, especially if symptoms do not improve. If the child is on opioids or benzodiazepine for more than 10 days, what you will do, you have to, same thing, instead of that, you have to reduce 10% of the pre-taper dose. We have to be very careful if they are on prolonged duration. So for simple thing, if there are more any children for 3 to 5 days, 20% of pre-taper dose, withdrawal assessment tool every 4 to 6 hours. And if it's more than 10 days, if they are on opioid and benzodiazepines, 10% of the pre-taper dose every day, and you alternate between the agents for reduction. So for withdrawal, what all you have dexmedetomidine, which is the alpha-2 receptor agonist, which has sedative, analgesic, and amnestic actions. It will maintain despite deep sedation. Arousal is maintained. So especially in the children with NIV and all, we will use this drug. So this will come as 200 mics in 20 ml ampule. So the dose is 0.3 to 0.7 mics per kg per hour. So you can put 200 mics in 50 ml NS. So each ml will give 4 mics per hour. Okay, depending on the weight of the child, you have to titrate how much ml you are giving. So I will give an example. It's a 20 kg child. You want to start at 0.4 mics per kg per hour. So how we will write the order? So it's like 200 mics in 50 ml. That is the standard order. 1 ml will give, as I mentioned, 4 mics per hour. But this is a 20 kg child. So how much it will give? 1 ml will give 4 divided by 20. So that is 1 by 5, 0.2 mics per kg per hour. So depending on how much you want to start with, you will put whether 0.4 if you want, you will start at 2 ml per hour. If you want to start at 0.6 mics per kg per hour, you will start at 3 ml per hour. Okay. So to give 0.4 mics per kg, you have to start at 2 ml per hour, mainly used in withdrawal or in children on NI. There are some other drugs which can be used as sedation analgesic, like ketamine, especially we will use in asthma. As in asthma, they have bronchodilator properties. It can be used in the dose range of 5 to 15 mics per kg per minute. And in super refractory status epilepticus, it can be used in the range of 1 to 10 milligram per kg per hour. It mainly has anesthetic, sedative, analgesic, and amnestic properties. Minimal cardiorespiratory depression can be there. Only thing, it stimulates the salivary and tracheobronchial secretions. And you can see ketamine is 50 milligram per ml, 10 ml ampule is there, which costs around 116 rupees. Okay, so you can load 30 milligram per kg in 50 ml NS. 1 ml per hour will give 10 mics per kg per minute. If you want to change into hours, it will be 0.6 milligram per kg per hour. Okay, remember 30 milligram per kg in 50 ml NS. 1 ml per hour will give 10 mics per kg per minute or 0.6 milligram per kg per hour. And the other drug which we can use for the procedural sedation, for the short acting, is propofol. Okay, it's a pure sedative and hypnotic. Do not have any analgesic effect. It has a short half-life. Dose is 1 milligram per kg, followed by 2 to 3 milligram per kg per hour. You can see here 1 ml, 10 milligram. 1 ml is 10 milligram vial is there, and which costs around 256, 257 rupees. This one you need not dilute or anything. It will be like a milky colored lipid solution. So you have to just load and connect as an infusion, depending on 10 kilos or 20 kilos, depending on the thing. And there is something known as clonidine also can be used for the withdrawal, which is an alpha-2 receptor agonist. Again, usual dose, if you are starting the infusion, unlikely if you are starting orally, it's 4 mics per kg. IV also, or infusion 0.1 to 0.2 mics per kg per hour. So this is the final thing, like benzodiazepines, sedation, analgesic, amnestic, anxiolytic properties. Benzodiazepines, they don't have analgesic effect. Barbiturates also, like they don't have analgesic or anxiolytic effect. Opioids, as I discussed, morphine and all, they don't have amnestic and anxiolytic effects. And dexmedetomidine, they don't have this amnestic effect. And ketamine, they don't have this anxiolytic effect. And propofol, analgesic effect is not there. So what happened to our child? We started on fentanyl, and child was oxygenation status worsened, requiring high P. You want to prone the child, okay, because his oxygenation is bad. We discussed in the previous lecture. One way to improve is proning, early proning, and you want to start on neuromuscular blockers. So which one will you choose and the dose? Again, we have so many things like depolarizing neuromuscular blockers, non-depolarizing neuromuscular blockers. You can see the dose, onset of action, duration of action. Commonly used is what available in our ICU is atracurium, cisatracurium, and vecuronium. So, but what about the succinylcholine? You can see the onset of action is very fast, 0.5 minutes, duration is 5 to 10 minutes. Why can't we use? So in case if you're intubating any child, you want to use succinylcholine, what are the pros and cons? So as I mentioned, The good things are it is faster acting than any non-depolarizing neuromuscular blocker. 30 to 45-second action will be rapidly metabolized by pseudocholinesterase. But the side effects like cardiac arrhythmias, it can cause raised ICP, intraocular pressure, and hyperkalemia and malignant hyperthermia. So because of all these things, so this is not the drug of choice, especially in the sick children. So what about the other drugs, non-depolarizing neuromuscular blocking agents like vecuronium, atracurium, cisatracurium? Rocuronium, if it is there, that is the best. Like it has a quick and short duration of action, especially in the emergency situation and the renal failure, it is very safe. But disadvantages like it is very expensive, like 5 ml injection will cost around 325 rupees. So other things, atracurium can be fast action, but the side effect of histamine release and anaphylaxis is there. Cisatracurium, the other pro version, it has a slower action but more potent. It's eliminated by Hoffman elimination and less incidence of anaphylaxis is there. And vecuronium, again, the safe and most commonly used, but the disadvantage is slow onset of action. So during the intubation, if you want to use, if you have rocuronium, yes, that is best. Otherwise, you may have to use atracurium, small dose. So these all three things we have. Atracurium is like 2.5 ml, 25 milligram ampule will be there, and cisatracurium 20 milligram, 10 ml ampule will be there. So atracurium is only 147 rupees, whereas cisatracurium is very costly. It comes around, I think, 850 rupees, and vecuronium. So which one will you choose? We already discussed, and how to load the drug. So cisatracurium, usually the dose to be 1 mics per kg per minute. Okay, so how you will get 1 mic per kg per minute? Load 3 mg per kg. This is like a Caesar dose midas, which we discussed already. 1 mic per kg per minute. How did we load Caesar dose midas? 3 milligram per kg in 50 ml of NS in 5D. Okay, so 1 ml per hour will give 1 mic per kg per minute. So if you want to start cisatracurium infusion, you start it like 3 mg per kg in 50 ml NS. So atracurium, the dose range is from 5 to 15 mics. So how you will load? It's like a dopamine, which we will discuss later. 15 milligram per kg in 50 ml of NS or 5D. 1 ml per hour will give 5 mics per kg per minute. Okay, so that's what the range. Cisatracurium 1 to 3 mics per kg per minute you can titrate, and atracurium 5 to 15 mics. So this how we will load, we have discussed. So the child we have prone for 48 hours, oxygenation improved, you started on neuromuscular blockers, cisatracurium infusion, but noted to have new onset high grade fever after 72 hours of hospitalization. And you notice child is having secondary sepsis and septic shock. You want to start on some inotropes. So what are the different inotropes or vasopressors and the doses what we have? So we will discuss this next. So adrenaline or noradrenaline, just remember the dose. It's like a single strength. If you want to load single strength, it is 0.3 mg per kg in 50 ml of NS or 5D. At 1 ml per hour will give 0.1 mics per kg per minute. The dose is 0.1 to 1 mic per kg per minute. And the double strength is you have to just double it. Okay, 0.6 mg per kg in 50 ml of 5% dextrose or NS. 1 ml per hour will give 0.2 mics per kg per minute. But remember, double strength, try to avoid to give in the peripheral line. Unless you have central line, because the side effects of the extravasation and tissue necrosis. And the adrenaline comes in 1 mg in 1 ml, and noradrenaline also will come in 1 mg in 1 ml. Adrenaline costs around 15 rupees, whereas noradrenaline will be around 50 rupees. So we will see with an example for a 20 kg child, if you want to write a single strength of adrenaline or noradrenaline of 0.1, how you will load? It's 0.3 mg per kg. So his weight is 20 kilos. So 0.3 into 20 will be 6 milligram. 6 milligram of adrenaline or norad in 50 ml of NS. 1 ml per hour will give 0.1 mics per kg per minute. Double strength, you have to just double the dose. And I also already mentioned, never start double strength inotrope infusion in a peripheral line. In some centers, they may load half of the single strength in a peripheral line. That is also there. In adults, sometimes they may use 8 milligram in 250 ml NS or 16 milligram in 250 ml NS, which comes to around 32 mics per ml or 64 mics per ml. So you have to see the weight and you have to calculate accordingly. So this is what the standardly we will follow. This already Sister Jansi has been explained this, how to make 1 in 1000. So this only we will load 0.3 mg per kg, 10 kilo child. Suppose you want to give 3 mg, that is like 3 ml. So dilute 3 ml of adrenaline, remaining 47 will be your NS or 5D, and you administer it 1 ml per hour. Okay. And double strength is just double of it. Okay, 0.6 milligram per kg. So noradrenaline, as I already mentioned, It's available in 1 milligram 1 ml ampule, 0.3 mg per kg. So if you want 3 milligrams, you have to take 3 ml and 47 ml. So there are some confusion regarding the noradrenaline. If you see here, I just highlighted. If you can see, each ml contains noradrenaline bitartrate. Okay, that is 2 milligram. It will show like the 2 milligram 1 ml. But whatever the equivalent to noradrenaline is only 1 milligram. So whatever we take is 1 milligram per 1 ml. Okay, not this bitartrate thing. Okay, that is a salt. This equivalent to noradrenaline thing is 1 milligram. So 1 ml, 1 milligram only we will take for all the calculations. So what happened to our child? We started on adrenaline, noradrenaline, 0.2 mics per kg per minute and 0.3 mics per kg per minute. If you see the BP is still wide pulse pressure is there. This is the intra-arterial BP. Diastoles are very low, 30, and you have done arterial blood gas, which showed ionized calcium of 1.05. That is also low. So you want to bring your diastolic blood pressure high, mainly to maintain the perfusion, coronary perfusion, and also what all you can do. Okay, vasopressin can be given. So vasopressin, you can see this is 20 units per ml. 1 ml ampule will be there, and it costs around 226 rupees. So what is the dose? It's 0.01 to 0.06 units per kg per hour. How you will write the order? 1 unit per kg in 50 ml of NS or 5D. Each ml will give 0.02 units per kg per hour. So for a 20 kg child, if you want to start with 0.02 units per kg per hour, you have to load 20 units of vasopressin and 50 ml of NS or 5D at 1 ml per hour, which give 0.02 units per kg per hour. So vasopressin, this already I have explained. So what about the calcium? Calcium is also load. So you want to load the calcium. So whatever available calcium you can see is 10% calcium gluconate. That is like 10 grams in 100 ml. That is each ml will give 100 milligrams. So what is the infusion you can give? Calcium infusion is 10 to 40 milligram per kg per hour. You can just give undiluted. You can take 55 ampules of 10 ml and you can load in 50 cc. But how much to give? So just remember, whatever is the weight of the child, divide by 10. That much will give 10 mg per kg per hour. Suppose for 20 kg child, you have to write injection 10% calcium gluconate, 50 ml undiluted at 20 kg child. So divide by 10. That will be 2 ml per hour. That will give 10 mg per kg per hour. If you want to give 20 mg per kg per hour, you have to double it. 4 ml per hour you have to write, then it will give 20 mg per kg per hour. Remember, weight by 10. That will give 10 milligram per kg per hour. Suppose 30 kg child is there, you have to write 50 ml undiluted at 3 ml per hour. So what happened to a child? You started on vasopressin, calcium infusion, BPs are stabilized. You also notice his cardiac dysfunction is set in. Probably sepsis-induced myocardial dysfunction. So what are the inodilators available and what are the dose? So milrinone is there. You can see here 1 milligram 1 ml. Usually 10 ml ampule is there. So what is the dose? You can just write 10 milligram in 50 ml NS or 5D and run it at 1 ml. So how much 1 ml per hour will give? That is 3.3 divided by weight. That will give your mics per kg per minute. So the dose range is 0.3 to 0.7 mics per kg per minute. Suppose 20 kg child, you want to start at 0.3 mics per kg per minute. How you will write the order? 10 milligram in 50 ml NS or 5D. Each ml will give 3.3 divided by weight. Weight of the child is 20. So 3.3 divided by 20 will be somewhere around 0.16 mics per kg per minute. But you want to start 0.3 mics per kg per minute. So you have to start at 2 ml per hour so that it will give 0.3 mics per kg per minute. And you have to see how much you have to titrate, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, depending on the child's condition, you have to titrate. So remember 10 milligram milrinone, you take 1 ampule, dilute in 50 ml of NS, and each ml depending on 3.3 by weight, that will give your mics per kg per minute. And the next commonly used drug, dobutamine. This is also available as Dobutrex, 250 milligram in 5 ml. Ampule will be there. So this costs around 441 rupees. Dose is around again 5 to 15 mics per kg per minute. Remember, dobutamine and dopamine, the calculation is similar. 15 milligram per kg in 50 ml of NS of 5D will give 1 ml per hour will give 5 mics per kg per minute. If you want to give double strength, 30 milligram per kg in 50 ml of NS or 5D, 1 ml per hour will give 10 mics per kg per minute. Okay. In some centers, they may use rule of 6, that is 6 milligram per kg in 50 ml per NS. That mics per minute will be little less. Then you have to give more ml per hour. Okay. So standardly, we will follow this 15 milligram per kg in 50 ml NS or 5D, 1 ml will give 5 mics, whereas double strength, it is double of it, 30 mg per kg in 50 ml NS or 5D, 1 ml will give 10 mics per kg per minute. So 20 kg child, 5 mics per kg per minute double strength. If you want to load, how you will write 50 ml NS, you will start at 0.5 ml per hour. That will give your 5 mics per kg per minute. Okay, so this is again, as Sister Jansi mentioned, what we want by what we have into number of divisions. Depending on that, she got it. So this child needs 225 milligram. 250 milligram is 5 ml. So for 225 milligram, it will be around 4.5 ml. So take that 4.5 ml dobutamine, add it in 44.5 ml of NS, and run it at 1 ml per hour. And there is some other newer things like levosimendan is there, which is very costly. It's actually lyophilized powder, which needs to be reconstituted in 5 ml of water for injection or 5% dextrose. Okay, the dose, it's like a double strength noradrenaline. Okay, usually that 0.2 mics per kg per minute is the thing. Usually we'll give for 24 hours, not more than 24 hours because of side effects. So like a double strength adrenaline norad, you can load 0.6 milligram per kg in 50 ml of NS or dextrose, and you will run it at 1 ml per hour over 24 hours. So 20 kg child, 20 into 0.6 will be 12 milligram. Okay, this is 12.5 milligram will be there, lyophilized powder. You can use that in 50 ml of NS or 5D, run it at 1 ml per hour over 24 hours. The dopamine, especially in the resource limited settings, you can use this, especially in the post-transplant children with veno-occlusive disease. There is some role to increase the splanchnic circulation and also dopamine, the single strength and double strength is same like dobutamine. So I'm not going in detail here. Same 15 milligram per kg, 1 ml per hour is 5 mics, 30 milligram per kg, 1 ml is 10 mics. So sometimes methylene blue in severe vasoplegic shock or sometimes in methemoglobinemia, you may have to use. This is 1% methylene blue, that is 10 milligram in 1 ml. So again, the dose is 1 ml per hour. So 100 milligram dilute in 25 ml of water for injection. So 1 ml per hour will give 4 by weight per mg per kg per hour. So the range is 0.25 to 2 mg per kg per hour. You have to choose how much you want to start. Suppose example 20 kg child, you want to start 1 milligram per kg per hour. How you will put methylene blue 100 milligram in 25 ml water for injection. So 1 ml per hour will give 4 milligrams per hour. But you want per kg per hour. So what is the weight? 4 divided by weight is 0.2 milligram per kg per hour. You want to start at 1 milligram per kg per hour. So you have to give 5 ml per hour of this concentration. Then only it will give 1 mg per kg per hour. Okay. So that's how the methylene blue and some other rare drugs like phenylephrine, especially in the top spell to increase your systemic vascular resistance. Again, remember, it's 3 mg per kg in 50 ml. 1 ml per hour will give 1 mics per kg per minute. This is like a Caesar dose midas. And prostaglandin for the especially drug-dependent systemic and pulmonary lesions, it's very costly drug. It comes around 5,300 rupees. The range is 10 to 60 nanograms per kg per minute. So the calculation is 60 mics per kg in 50 ml NS. 1 ml per hour will give 20 nanograms per kg per minute. So depending on how much you want the dose, you can titrate accordingly. And for the hypokalemia corrections, usually we have 15% KCl available. So asymptomatic, usually oral and in the ward they can manage. Main our thing will come when the child needs correction, potassium correction, especially symptomatic moderate hypokalemia, where you have to give infusion KCl. So how you will give 0.2 milliequivalent per kg per hour for 4 hours. Maximum dose is 40 milliequivalents if you have a peripheral line. Milliequivalents per liter peripheral line. If central line, you can use 60 milliequivalents per liter. If it's symptomatic and severe, less than 2.5, you may have to use 0.4 milliequivalents per kg per hour for 4 hours. Okay, so 0.4 into weight into 4 you will do. That will give your milliequivalents, and each 1 gram of KCl will give 13 milliequivalents, and depending on that, you will calculate and you will write. And the hyperkalemia, these things are the main thing here. Calcium you have to give for stabilization, and the insulin, how you will load. That is the common thing. The dose is 0.1 units per kg of atropate. In 5 ml per kg of 10% dextrose, you can give over 1 hour. Okay, so that is the important thing in the hyperkalemia. So this I already mentioned. So this is example 400 milligrams of KCl you want to give in 50 ml of NS over 4 hours. That is the order written. What you have available form is 1500 milligram in 10 ml. 1 ampule is there. So use 5 cc syringe. Again, what we want is 400 milligram, and what we have is 1500 milligram into number of the divisions into 10 into 5. That will come into around 13.3 divisions. That is around 12.5 ml per hour we have to start. So 400 milligrams, how much to dilute? Depending on that, we have to add them. And other common things like bicarbonate, because especially in the ICUs, children with metabolic acidosis, with severe metabolic acidosis, pH of less than 7 and all, you may have to give bicarb correction. So how to give that? 0.3 into weight into base excess. So dose is like 1 milliequivalent per kg per dose. And magnesium correction, if you want to give for hypomagnesemia less than 1.6, give 0.1 ml per kg of 50% max cells over 20 minutes. And at the last, you have 5% albumin is there, 250 ml. Can be given like a colloid bolus, fluid bolus. And 20% albumin is also there. That will give 20 grams in 100 ml. Can be mixed with Lasix and be given like 1 gram per kg of albumin with some Lasix, depending on how much you want to start Lasix, 1 mg per kg or 2 mg per kg. Depending on that, you will mix these two and you can start. And remember, never dilute this Lasix with 5% dextrose, because these both will form precipitate. I think I have finished here. So remember the drug, so many drugs, things, calculations, the errors are possible. So the next class is on the medication errors. And thank you, sister, for this opportunity.
Thank you, Shiva, for that extensive overview of the common medications used in ICU and HDU. I invite Mrs. Mary and Mrs. Ruma to present their lecture.
Good afternoon, everyone. Indeed, I thank Almighty for His grace upon all of us, and a very special thanks to CMC admin and also the PQ team, excellent PQ team, I should say, because of the big harmony that we have between the medical and the nursing personnel over here. We get, as nursing manager, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to Dr. Ebar, who's very great support to us and for his initiation, and a wonderful opportunity is provided for us for the cross learning. And I also would like to thank Dr. Kala, who's the head of PQ now at the moment, and thank the entire team, of course, for this opportunity. Medication error, it's one of the quality indicators. All of us know there are many other nursing quality indicators like pressure source, falls, adverse events, patients' complaints, and medication error. So this is one of the major or most important quality indicator for any hospital to be commented upon, especially the nursing care to be commented upon. This is one of the major indicators, and therefore a lot of focus is being given on this. So what is a medication error? Medication error, it can happen in terms of error in prescribing, dispensing, or administration of a drug. It probably would have led to a worse consequence, or wouldn't have led to at all, because there is one category which we call it as near miss error. So whether it has caused an adverse effect or not, still it is a medication error which has to be very seriously taken into consideration in every unit, and especially in a critical care setup where children come with a lot of issues and parents are in turmoil, and they have their own mental agony, and there we are not supposed to be adding on to their trauma, the psychological trauma, I mean. The classification of drug errors, we classify as from class A to class I. We will see each one of in detail. Class A error is, the next slide please. Class A error is otherwise called near miss error. Actually, in terms of loading or in terms of taking the drug, the error has not happened, but it is on the document that probably the doctor has made wrong medication order, or the doctor has written the right order, but the nurse we used to have a card system where we actually duplicate the same order onto the card. So probably the nurse had made that card in a wrong way. So where the documentation on part of the doctor or on the card is wrong, but the staff actually has not loaded the drug. So it's otherwise called as a near miss error. So that is class A error. Class B error is the next one. Next slide, please. Class B error, where the error did not reach the patient. Wrong medication has been loaded by the nurse, and probably she had realized that she had done an error, and she stopped somebody, maybe her colleague standing nearby had stopped her. And so the medication error had not occurred to the patient. So that's called class B error. Class B error is where it has reached the patient but unlikely to cause an harm. Say for example, she by mistake had given 1 dose of multivitamin, but it's not so deadly, just a dose alone. So it's still a medication error, but it is not that harmful compared to other type of errors. And class D error, where patient, it has reached the patient and it has necessitated monitoring and intervention, and which is intense again. It's adding discomfort to the child, it's adding up cost to the patient, and also no nursing time, taking into consideration the nursing time. So where, say for example, digoxin, instead of giving 0.05 mg, the nurse had given 0.1 mg. It's a double dose, which requires monitoring of heart rate, and probably she has to go ahead giving stomach wash and so on. So it extends the nursing time, and also it increases the discomfort to the patient, and so this is classified as class D error. Class E error, where temporary harm has happened to the patient. Say for example, captopril double dose has been given, and we know the consequence of it. It will eventually lead into hypotensive shock, and therefore it is harmful to the patient, and so it is temporary harm that is caused to the patient can be reverted by giving fluids and so on. So, but still harm has happened, and so therefore we classify it as class E error. Next slide, please. Class F error is prolonged hospitalization. Say for example, instead of double dose of digoxin, this nurse has given 10 times more. Instead of 0.05 mg, she had overlooked it, and she has given 0.5 mg, which is almost 10 times more, which is really detrimental to the patient, and so that we call it as class F error, which causes prolonged hospitalization. And the next error is, next slide please, class G error, where it has caused permanent harm to the patient. Immunosuppressants being withheld for a renal transplant patient post-operatively, which is detrimental again. So that is class where a permanent harm has happened to the patient, and that's called class G error. Class H is where patient sustenance of life. Patient has to be put on a ventilator, and a lot of efforts have to be taken to sustain his life. So that is classified as class H error. Class where ultimately we have lost the patient. Death has happened, and maybe withholding a post-operative drug, say post-operative antihypertensive not given, and patient died because of that. That's the most detrimental error, and which we call it as class I error. So that's how we go ahead classifying the errors. And now here again, how do we look at these medication errors? We definitely, it's not like a blame game kind of a situation. No, you did it. You always do this. You're such a kind of staff. I don't know, somehow you got into the system. Who appointed you? This kind of things really traumatizing to the staff, and therefore it should be a kind of friendly atmosphere. At the same time, we must make sure as nurse managers, we cannot create a kind of fearful atmosphere to staff nurses. I'm not saying that we have to be totally free, sort of any mistakes can happen. No, always patient safety is a must. Patient safety should be popping out on everybody's mind. It should be on the nurse's mind, it should be on the doctor's mind, it should be at every level, every unit. And so patient safety cannot be compromised, and therefore, we cannot make our care standard kind of thing, and there is no compromise for it. So how do we strike a balance? We have to keep our patients happy, no errors should happen, and also at the same time we have to keep our staff nurses happy, and they should not commit errors. So especially being a nurse manager, we must try to strike balance between both. And what we actually follow in CMC, actually I congratulate our nursing superintendent for all the backup that we get, staff support that we get from her. We at the time of selection itself, she makes sure appropriate candidates are selected through various sorts of scrutiny, and then they get, after getting in also, they undergo a program called CBT program, competency-based training program, where 3 blocks are there. One is for the soft skills, one is for the technical skills, and for the admin policies and so on. So there, these are very mandatory procedures. So time and every now and then they will be made to practice this. And a lot of quiz programs are conducted in the nursing administration over there. And then only every week almost they are conducting tests practically, and also to check on their theory input. And then they are screened. Only if they are eligible to give patient care, they are entertained into the unit. So that is strictly adhered in the nursing service administration. And once we come up, our nursing superintendent, she makes sure that all these are being very strictly followed in the unit, conducting quiz programs, having staff development program every day, drug quizzes, and also staff counseling. No, in case the staff has done error, what is the problem? No, there should be some problem behind that. Therefore, staff counseling, not in terms of educational counseling alone, probably some psychological trauma behind in her mind. Child is sick at home, or she is not well. She is not sort of having stress on her mind. So every day we have allotted precepts in the unit where the preceptors are one for 3 staff nurses. They try to call them each day, end of the day, what is your problem and how are you doing? All those kind of staff counseling happens. And also we have a staff appreciation box. When they do well, we make sure that the staff appreciation is put in there, and that also has been facilitated. So the preceptorship and performance evaluation also for the junior staff once in 3 months, for the senior staff once in 6 months, and well experienced staff once in 2 years. Like that, the staff performance appraisal also is done. So that's a kind of situation where we strike a balance between keeping the staff happy, at the same time no errors happen, especially in terms of medication error. What are some of the causes of error? I'm sure all of it, there's a kind of reiteration between us. So too many patients. When we allocate patients to the nurses in a general ward, 1:6, in a ICU setup, 1:1. If let's say, for example, a post cardiac child or in immunocompromised child, 1:1. Otherwise, 1:2. In high dependency, 1. So making sure that staff nurses are not overloaded. Lack of concentration, again, as I told you, are they hard pressed for some issue at the back? And so providing counseling and shortage of staffing, we must make sure. In CMC, thank God, we have always, at any given time when we step in, it's always about 90%, 100%, I should say. Even if there is a kind of crunch, still it may not be definitely less than 90%, even during the COVID season. And double checking should be made possible. And here, especially, I should congratulate Ruma ma'am, who is our former HOD. She made sure even in the wards, there should be double checking of the drugs, whether it is a high-risk drug or an ordinary drug, they should be double checked. And illegible prescriptions. Is there a doctor's signature on the prescription? That should be made sure. And misinterpretation of prescriptions, especially where the doctors write, I'm not, we really congratulate our doctors. They're very, very good. For any, there is no kind of, we can just open up ourselves. We see you have written, it's not clear, and immediately they are there to help us out. So, they also working round the clock, may not be doing it intentionally in case any where like that, the prescription, it's not legible, always must get back to the person without any fear factor, so that they will rectify it and error wouldn't happen. And human errors and undue abbreviations being used. The other day, it happened. So there was an order, not in PICU, in one of the wards, where tab para, and we had to correct. It's not tab para, doctor, it's tab paracetamol. So undue abbreviations cannot be used. Immediately, he was humble enough to just immediately, he's a new person into the system and he's a learner, a student. And therefore, anybody, even at the senior level in our hospital, and especially in pediatric wards, and particularly in PICU, there is no issue in correcting any senior person as well. Their corrections, always there is a give and take. So oral orders, oral orders, especially we make sure that the read back policy, you get the oral order in terms of emergency and it is read back and it's written on the doctor's order sheet. That reinforcement is always there. And always make sure in terms of emergency where we get the order written within 24 hours. So otherwise, in any other normal situation, oral orders are not entertained at all. And look-alike, sound-alike drugs, Ruma ma'am will deliberate in detail about that. And wrong dosage calculations, where again, the junior staff are mentored well, and always there is a calculator available, and double check. Even I can make a lot of mistakes, even with these many years of experience. So if I have a doubt, why shouldn't I go to a person who knows it better and I can get it clarified? And therefore, that kind of harmonious environment will definitely facilitate a kind of checks and always for patient safety. So sources of medication error, when we continue on, inaccurate recording of orders and erroneous labeling. This can happen in the pharmacy. I had also seen we move around for projects to various places where big queues they're happening, big queues, and where no policy, admin policy, where can the patient's relatives be entertained, having a TV on, and there are chairs available, they're seated up, so that they will not be standing and no causing pressure over the pharmacist, no screaming and all that. So those kind of administration policies can also be taken up, where no calmness is available for the pharmacists, because they're also like sort of struggling to strike balance, so that they will also be able to do it in a calm and quiet environment. And misidentification of the client, especially nurses, must make sure that they double check. Always they must double check the patient ID. There should not be any patient, child particularly, without the patient ID. So double checking that, and incomplete delivery of drugs can happen. Actually, online system and all the tube system, all those are really facilitating a lot. But where hospitals, we do not have the online intending system, patients have to go wait there, and when they take all these stuff into the bag, probably they have lost some on the way, or some are sitting still on the desk. So it's the nurse's responsibility to counter check whether all drugs have been, whichever have been prescribed, have been procured from the pharmacy, and verification of the order as well. And inadequate knowledge from the staff side cannot be taken into consideration. No, I did by ignorance, I made an error. That cannot be possible. So that's why we keep on giving them drug quizzes and making sure that they get 100 out of 100. For other procedures, at least we say 90%. But for this medication, it should be 100 out of 100. And then only we allow them to practice. And performance pressure again, here again, having mentorship and preceptorship, all that helps in many ways. So say quantity errors, again, unless the nurse knows what is the correct dosage, expected dosage. So we ensure that drug books are available. Of course, it's on the system also, but we make the students have their drug book, and staff nurses also have their drug book. Formularies are available, making sure that the correct, and she knows what is the correct dosage. How is that if an error made accidentally by the doctor, how will she be able to correct? And therefore, making sure that the correct dosage is known by the staff by all these means. And also prescribing error can happen, especially if the history of the patient is not known well. Say, for example, aspirin being prescribed for a patient who is having bleeding already. So that can also cause a prescribing error. And I just quoted that example, Tiapara, and we had to correct saying, please, can you make it as paracetamol? An illegible handwriting, I had already mentioned. Next slide, please. So there can be prescribing error, there can be dispensing error, there be administration errors. So to reduce that, electronic prescriptions are welcomed, and many units are in our hospital. Currently, they're trying out in one particular unit, and once it is facilitated, once we get the feedback, probably it's going to be made universal. And this actually will minimize, because everything is going to be typed on, and so hand legibility of the handwriting, those issues wouldn't arise. So we can go into electronic prescribing methods, which are the updated ones now. Computerized physician order entry, which are really welcome. Electronic prescriptions, computerized physician orders, and drug-drug interaction, where warfarin prescribed to a patient already on salicylates, and duplicate therapy, patient who's on atenolol, actually on one anti-hypertensive drug, but already is on, we have the medication reconciliation. I'm sure all of you will also have, where what tablets the patient already has been on, it's there in the medication reconciliation. So the nurse gets all the details about the home medications, and she puts it on the medication form, the medication reconciliation form, and that is compared with the present doctor's order and things like that. So it is a kind of tip for the doctors to follow it up on that. And no indications that, sometimes there can be orders where there is no indication at all. Say, for example, cetirizine being ordered for a patient with fever. So all this, because all of us work very hard, always there can be friendly reminders, and when we make an error, you can correct us. When you make an error, we can correct us, and having keeping only patient safety as our concern. And even wrong orders like Penedur being written as IV, how can it be given? So the nurse should sharply click her mind. How can I give Penedur IV to a child at that even? No, anybody for that matter. So any wrong orders, it should sharply give a kind of thinking to her. So critical thinking. That's why we give a lot of scenario-based kind of situations where children The students, the staff nurses, junior staff nurses particularly, they are triggered every time by giving scenario-based kind of situations where they'll be able to improve on their critical thinking. So work environment, as I already told you, and no workload, communication gap between the team members. Here, I should say, even middle of the night, my nurses, they call the HOD, whether it's 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, they know when they are not able to access the junior call. I'm not particularly telling about PICU. PICU, all the time, round the clock, we have doctors, but in the pediatric wards, they feel extremely free, 100% free. If they're not able to contact for any reason, the registrar or the second call is busy, caught up, immediately they go ahead calling the HOD, and the HOD is there on time. So these are some of the kind of learning and for all of us, for that matter. So for physical and mental well-being of the staff, as I told you already, trying to make sure that all of us are stressed. Who's not stressed, especially in this complex era? All of us have some trauma or the other. Even this 2-year-old child, you can see, with a lot of stress on mind. Therefore, looking into the welfare of the staff nurses, psychological welfare of the staff nurses or the staff working in our unit is also very important. We have actually a nurse counselor from College of Nursing. She has been arranged and she visits every week almost different areas, and she gives staff counseling, not only targeting on the critical area. She goes around to all the wards as well. So for lack of knowledge, conducting STPs and conducting quizzes and staff training programs. And one more thing which I had noticed, it's not now actually, where the doctors can sign up and leave. Just because they're very busy, they can just sign the prescription and leave, telling the nurses to write. I'm not saying this happens all the time. I say maybe no, I had not identified, but this can actually cause the kind of error. No, however busy, the doctor should make sure that the prescription is written only by them, because we have not come up to the level of nurse practitioner thing. It's not authorized in our setup. So prescriptions must be written only by the doctors and cannot be signed and left empty for the nurses to fill in. Actually, in our setup, we don't have this kind of problem, but I'm saying it can be an unforeseen problem if anywhere, and so therefore that cannot be entertained in any system. Okay. So dispensing errors, sound alike, look alike will be done by Mrs. Ruma Nayak. We actually have a reporting system where within 24 hours we have the incident report system where the staff nurse, she gives her comments and then reason for the error that had happened with all the patient details and her own details, and the nurse manager updates it, the charge nurse as well, and then it goes to the nursing service within 24 hours. And how do we actually do corrective actions here? Mostly with milder kind of errors, counseling, and then oral warning, and then memos and suspension and dismissal, depends on the type of error. If it is an eye error, probably kind of dismissal. So that's how it keeps going. So I just want to conclude saying that let's strike balance between patient safety, patient quality, at the same time keeping in mind that staff people are also very important to the institution. So safety of them and the well-being of them, so that we'll be able to minimize all these errors and we'll be able to move on. Ultimately keeping patients in the center, ensuring their safety. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Mary, for that excellent overview. You have given a comprehensive presentation on a Swiss cheese model of how hazards reach the patient and how that can be prevented. I invite now Mrs. Ruma to go ahead with her lecture.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this great session, what we have been having. I hope you all are still awake for the next few minutes. So this topic is given to me is look-alike and sound-alike drugs. And definitely a drive to patient safety is our mandate. And that's why we need to have this. And thank you, Dr. Mary Johnson, because you have already introduced few points about medication errors. And LASA errors are one of the components of medication errors, but it's an important aspect of our medication administration. So objectives for this class: introduction, definition, aim of LASA, drug management, role of the healthcare organization of the hospital, strategies to avoid LASA, risk assessment reduction, common drugs related to LASA, CMC policy, what we practice, and take home message with reference. So as an introduction, this LASA means look alike and sound alike drugs. So means that similar sounding drugs and drugs which have similar appearance. The impact is that it can cause potential medication error, and it's not within our local hospital what we need to be alert, but it's a concern worldwide, and it's taking a wide campaign, and it's also a mandate for the quality assurance that this is one aspect which has to be kept in mind. And we know that thousands of drugs are on the market, and all can lead to errors by any healthcare worker, starting from the pharmacy unit, from the medical people who are prescribing, and the nurses who are administering. And more medicines are being brought into the hospital and organizations because of the newer and better methods of treatment and the new brands. So that also makes more potential for Lassa medication errors. Also, the names can be very confusing with the non-proprietary and the proprietary names with the trademark names. In Malaysia, it was informed from 5,003 reports on near misses that medication errors which were happened, 6% of them were due to the Lassa medications. So the patient safety goal is that all sound, there should be a policy on look-alike and sound-alike drug management, which should be available in all the facilities, which should be provided in all the facilities like hospitals and smaller clinical settings. Next, please. What is the definition? Look-alike, sound-alike drugs. These involve the medications that are visually similar in physical appearance or packaging, and names of medication that have similar the spelling and even the similar phonetics, which means that it can sound similar. And some example what we have here is on daily basis we are administering all these drugs, may not be much in ICU, but in other wards and areas. These drugs can also lead, one of the classification of drugs is this group of drugs. So what's the aim? Minimize confusion between drug pairs by all the healthcare workers, improve communication with the healthcare team and health professionals, know the indication and double checking of all the drugs, so to avoid this Lassa errors which look alike and have similar phonetics. And also the drugs should be exclusive for patient's diagnosis, and whoever is prescribing or administering, they have to know the indications why this drug is being prescribed and administered. This can also help counsel and give information about the drug to the counsel up to the patient about the drug. And it also mentions the patient also should be empowered to bring to the notice of the health personnel that the certain drug which was being administered in the past and what is being given now has a different appearance, and even the label is different. Many of our patients are very alert, may not be in ICU because relatives may not be really handling the drugs, but in other areas, patient need to know that they need to bring it to the notice. If any medicine looks different or the dosage is given different, that has to be reported. And therefore, the patient needs to be knowledgeable and empowered to report any doubts regarding their medications. Next, please. What is the role of practitioners and organization? This I have seen in one of the websites. Change appearance of Lassa drugs on computer screens and bins and cards and label by using tall man lettering, which can identify any drug which sounds alike or looks alike, and highlighting, having colorful codes, or boldface, which will be very striking and give a alert to the healthcare personnel that this is, we need to check this up whether it is a correct drug to be administered. And install and use computerized alerts, mainly the pharmacy or the doctor who is prescribing, or even the nurse who is administering by looking at the computer. Configure computer screens to prevent Lassa drugs from appearing consecutively. And affix name alert stickers to identify which other look alike and sound alike drugs. Do not store Lassa drug pairs together. This I'll be showing in one of the pictures, how to place and keep the drugs which look alike and sound alike. Encourage reporting errors and potentially hazardous conditions. The main thing I want to really emphasize is here, mainly it's the nurses who administer the drugs. And many times we really, as Mary ma'am had said, many times nurses are scared to report drugs because they feel that they will be penalized and they'll have some disciplinary action. And that was what used to be really followed earlier. But nowadays we discourage that, try to discourage that and encourage the nurses to report errors, so they know that it's to really understand that how much impact and the child can be in danger. And there may be, of course, some action taken, but the more important thing is that the child's life should not be in danger. So we are trying to bring in a more positive environment and for this reporting errors among the nurses, since both Mary and myself from nursing background, we are really trying our best for that, for reporting. And it's a good thing that many of our nurses are coming forward and reporting the errors. Next slide, please. So healthcare organizations are to institute risk management strategies and to make policies what they think is well, and think and see what would be good for them. Errors related to Lassa medication also this way can be minimized and eliminated by having the policies and by complying. Identifying and implementation of safety precautions. So one of the ways is the storage, how to keep the drugs in such a way so that there'll be by no means there'll be any chance of errors. And at this point, I also want to emphasize that it is not only the prescribing people or administering who are actually the junior level healthcare personnel. Maybe it's the junior doctors who are prescribing. It is the junior nurses who are administering, or any level nurses. It may be the junior pharmacist who is dispensing the drugs right at the counter. And so we have to really remember they are all youngsters, and they, just like anybody else, they have the risk for making mistakes. And that's why the seniors have to be there watching and trying to identify and have a reporting system and make policies, make sure that not only the patients are safe, but even our healthcare workers also are able to be safe. Their self-esteem is protected. They are not stigmatized when they make an error. I know in the medical side, they are taken care very positively. And we are always told, why are you so mean on nurses? Why do you have such actions on nurses? So, it's among the senior level who have to really make sure the policies are made and the nurses and our healthcare workers are all protected. So education is one of the things. Mary ma'am was again mentioning that ongoing education has to be done. Maybe on Lassa, medication errors, maybe, and medication, calculations. Every 2 months we are doing among our department. So we are very scared. We always sensitize our nurses that, children should not be affected in any way. They are so vulnerable. Their metabolism is so, quick. They are so unstable. On top of that, if we go and give another medication error, it can be really harmful and potentially very, very patients can become very sick. So the only way, our responsibility at any level should be to educate our healthcare personnel on Lassas and medication errors and try to reduce the risk of mistakes. Avoid medical transcription. We used to have medical transcription earlier. Take the order and write it on a card and take the card and give it to the patient at the bedside. So thankfully, our NABH inspection has made us to realize the risk of medication errors by this medical transcription. And so we have stopped it. Use of prior order or use of electronic prescription can save a lot of risk of medication error. One of the things, Lassa medication error can happen because, again, the junior level people who are prescribing, who are administering, they are really not knowing all the drugs. They are not knowing all the dosages. So that is the biggest risk we have when that level of people, health personnel are, prescribing and administering drugs. So to take precautions, this can be also, in the presence of the senior person, the drugs can be given, prescribed, and in the clinical place near the bedside, it's the double checking it is being done by the senior nurses. Also, electronic prescription means that the order will be very clear. In a few slides later, you'll be seeing how the orders are very unreadable. Even myself, when I'm checking the medications, I'm so scared whether I'm reading the right medicine or not. So here again, look alike, sound alike. Some medication can, it will sound same as another medicine, but it will be actually supposed to be another drug. So we need to really keep in mind that even though we are reading, the medication order should be written very clearly, so that the nurse who is actually reading has to administer the drug also will know it's the correct drug. And there should not be any confusion whether it is the right drug or it is the wrong drug, what is being given. I didn't finish the previous, sorry. Yeah, hospital and department level pharmacy committee, where things like this and issues coming up, LASA, we need to report, so that they will, pharmacy committee has a very big role to play, and they really help us with all this policy making and to reduce errors. Yeah, medication error reporting system, we have a very good reporting system in the nursing from the beginning of our nursing service. When the beginning itself it was established. Now some of the medication error reporting is going as sentinel event, especially if it has caused some side effect to the patient. And yeah, and of course prefer standard manufactured companies, which is of course depend upon the doctors and the pharmacies, the units, which manufacturers they prefer. Okay, because mainly they will comply to what we would like to, order the medications. Yeah, next one, please. So what are the strategies to avoid the errors? First is the procurement. Procurement is mainly from the pharmacy to the bedside. That is in our setup. What happens is a patient relative who buys gets the medicine from the pharmacy, and they have no idea actually what is being given from the pharmacy. So the nurses have to go and they are the ones who are taking out from the bag and reading the label, and they have to make sure that it's the medicine, correct medicine. So in that case also, there may be a chance where the nurse is reading one drug, but actually the drug ordered is something different. And there can be a lot of confusion in that. So procurement also, the nurse needs to know, because they are the ones who are taking care of the patient, what is the diagnosis, why it is indicated, and this drug is something different. Why is this drug being given? So recheck with the pharmacy, what is the prescription given? So procurement is one of the ways to check whether the right medicine is being given. Storage is another thing, it is related to the ward setup and mainly related to nurses, how we store the medicines. And of course, it is related to the pharmacy, and nurses also keep the medicines in the refrigerator. One of the principles will come later to that, and you can see the picture how it should be kept. Prescribing is of course the doctor's responsibility. Here again, the doctor should be writing clearly, and so that there is no confusion about the nurses between two drugs which sound similar. Yeah. Dispensing and supplies also from the pharmacy. The pharmacy also should be able to dispense the correct medicine according to the prescription. Administration, again here also the nurses should be able to differentiate what is the correct, and if there's any doubt to recheck. Monitoring and audit should be done by the unit. We have a PICU senior staff unit group, and we audit whatever comes up, any drug errors, and it is very minimal, thankfully. Information and reporting system is ongoing, and patient education in the PICU, of course, the parents, they are not there, but in other areas, patients should be educated. What are the medicines they are bringing from home, what should be continued, and whether there is any look-alike, sound-alike drugs which need to be stored, and patient should be able to tell us. And evaluation of the ongoing LASA related drug errors. Procurement, as we mentioned already, availability of multiple medicine strengths, we should be checked whenever possible. Avoid purchase of too many packages. And another thing is that once what happens here, patients, the new medicines are prescribed and is kept at bedside, and the old medicines are still kept. So there's so many types of medicines. So we have a way that we have to return the medicines, and that should, even though it may not be look alike, sound alike, it may be, but to return the medicines to the pharmacy what is not being used. whenever possible, avoid purchase of medicines similar appearance. As new products are packaged and introduced, this also need to be kept in mind. Next, please. Storage. And we can see here that this is, of course, a pharmacy storage where so many drugs which look alike, they are kept together. But if they are different drugs, then they should be kept one below the other or on the extreme sides. That picture is coming next. So physical separation of LASA drugs is important. So even by mistake, it is not given. Practice of writing letters in capital letters, so that also could be distinguished from the sound alike. Like you can see the last example, metformin and metoprolol. So the one which is different, it is written in capital letters. Highlighting dissimilar letters in two names to distinguish between the two. Emphasize difference in medications with sound alike names and ongoing reinforcement. The Safe Medication Practice US Food Drug Administration Joint Commission, as we have seen, use of tall man lettering letters so that correctly, the two different medications can be immediately identified, because sometimes there may be metformin, metoprolol. Oh, somebody may think, oh, it's anyway the same thing, starting with met. Okay, let's just give it off. No. So this is very eye-catching and very distinct, so that immediately care workers to say these two are written this way, so that they are two different class of drugs with two different action, and for patients with have totally different conditions. Go to the next, please. So this was what I'm trying to say. This was in our refrigerator in the ICU. We can see, I really can't understand, I can't get the names. If Jansi is there, she can tell us. I think she only took the picture yesterday. Jansi, are you there? Okay. So as we see, the these eyes are symbol of the look-alike. So when it is look-alike, the medication should be kept on one shelf and the other one below shelf. Okay. So that even if it is on the side, there is chance that it can be given. So if it's one below the other, we know that this is a different drug, and to check the label correctly. So we can see the eye pictures here and the sound alike pictures here. All are kept one below, can be kept on either extreme ends. So I hope you understood what I'm trying to say. On top and below, top and below, top and below, both for the sound alike, look alike. And ideally look alike should be in a separate cupboard and sound alike should be in a separate cupboard. But this is in the ICU, we can't have so many fridges for look alike, sound alike. So that is why ICU nurses have to be very, very careful and look at the symbol and identify and then take the drug for the administration.
So these drugs are aminophylline and amiodarone, lignocaine and loxicard,
Okay.
and devil.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Siva, because this is so large that I couldn't make it. Yeah, thank you for that. Next one, please. Here also we have seen how it has been kept on top and below. So this is Atracurium, and the lower shelf is Vecuronidium. Okay, and the next one is Midazolam. It is an ampule, and the other one is vial. Sometimes if it's kept side by side, what can happen is the vial, ampule should be taken, but the vial is taken. And of course, it can have different, way of administration. And the last one is with the, again, look-alike lorazepam and noradrenaline. So I don't know why they have kept this. Maybe these are not very similar. Another example is albumin. As we have seen in the, Dr. Siva was presenting albumin as 5% and 20%. So here again, if they're all kept side by side, in a hurry, somebody can just say, okay, anyways, albumin, let's take it. It should be the same. But then if it kept in different shelves, upper and lower, then they'll be able to usually identify, okay, this is 5%, so I need to take that. So this is how it helps us in our institution to distinguish between the various look-alike, sound-alike. And in the fridge, there is a label, this which is kept here. We have taken a photograph. Look-alike is lorazepam, noradrenaline. And sound-alike, albumin, the infusion strength, and injection midas, vial, and ampule, vecuronium, atracurium, and atrapid. So this way we can help prevent the LASA errors. This is in the ward what we have made. Sound alike drugs. This also, if Dr. Siva can read
So sound adrenaline, atropine, and noradrenaline. Like Lasix and Devil.
Yeah, here I would like to say again, I mean, this also should be kept, one below the other. So they have, this is mainly the symbols which are showing the sound alike and the look alike, which is very easy to identify. Please take me for this thing that it should be kept one on top and one below. The same look alike, sound alike should be in the upper row and lower row. Next one, please. Yeah, sound alike, look alike drugs also need to have color coding. We have, as Mary ma'am had spoken about medication errors. So all medication error need to be have, with the color coding. And for look alike, sound alike, it is the yellow color. Next one, please. Yeah, color coding also to be used, as we have seen. Additional warning labels like for look alike medicines, like we have seen the symbol I and the ears for phonetics. Warning label should be uniform throughout the respect facility. So this I symbol and ear symbol, it is used throughout CMC. And this actually, those of you who are, going for NABH inspection, this is what we were got, from them, that they said we have to have labels and we have to include the LASA to prevent the medication error. So from that NABH inspection, we were able to come to this, and throughout CMC is being followed. And institution policy, our policy also I'll be telling you later in the last slide. Okay, no, yeah, prescribing. I know it's doctor's role, and I'm sure you all are taking so much of precautions for that. Write legibly. Mainly, please remember, it's the nurses who have to read your writing and administer the drug. By any chance, if there's something which is not clear, they have to go and check, and they have to find out from drug information, which I do. Is it correct? What is the drug which is written? And write clearly so that we are able to without any problem. And prescription should clearly specify, so because in the pharmacy and also they have to get the correct medication with the complete drug order. And I think by now we are going to have the online prescription, which is going to be also by the nurses at the older drugs, so that, because mainly it is very clear. I know in many institutes it's not possible at all to have computers just for prescribing medicines, but at least if the drugs are written clearly with complete, then it's very easy for the nurses, and they can administer the drugs very safely to the patients. So include diagnosis of medication indications for use. This is not really practical, but then in the teaching, why the drug is being prescribed, that can be used, and that can be heard by everybody. Everybody will know, and everyone should know why the drug is being given for the indication. And this also helps to differentiate. This is mainly not really LASA, but could be related to LASA also. And maybe in the rounds also, when the drugs are being prescribed, there could be an alert that there's another drug to this type, and should not make any error in the prescribing. I'm sorry, I'm just telling to the medical thing and discipline, because we are all related together in the drugs. That's why I'm just explaining our difficulties. Whenever possible, drug name in computerized prescriber should incorporate tall man lettering. Even while prescribing on the computer also, tall man lettering will help enable to avoid the sound alike drugs. Communicate clearly. Everybody should know why the drug is given, what's the drug is given, and the complete dose. Take, especially if we know that we in education institution, any healthcare setting, we have to train the juniors, and they should be able to work. So the communication system is very important. And we also say one nurse should be always there in the rounds. So any drug order is changed, they should know about the drug and it was changed and it should be given. So communication within the health team members. Take time to pronounce a drug name whenever an oral order has to be made. So whenever in emergency, what happens? A drug is ordered, verbal order is given, and the nurse hears it, she has to take the drug and administer. But before taking and loading, going for that, she has to check and repeat the drug name. Make sure that it's the name which the doctor wants. So once the approval is there, then the drug has to be loaded and prepared for administration. Ask the recipient of oral communication, repeat the medication name and dose, what I was trying to say. Verbal orders should be limited to emergencies only because of lack of time. And in no way where the verbal order should be given, mainly because of problem of communication, and that can lead to medication errors. It has happened few times, and so this is a lesson for us. And there are other things which will come up. So here I can tell you, you can see very easily what's the difference between the two. The one which is printed in the drug form, OxyContin and MS-Contin. I don't know whether we are not giving this maybe in pediatrics, but the written one, everybody has different handwriting and it can be very unclear. So especially if it is a sound-alike drug, nurse has to read it, and then there may be confusion about which is the correct one to be followed. Next one, please. Here again also, the handwriting can be very difficult to read. So as far as possible, for the benefit of the healthcare team and the patient safety, it will be good to have a clear handwriting, and writing in printed will be really good because it's very, very clear to read. Next. Dispensing, here is mainly from the pharmacy, identify the medicines. And we know that in the small hospitals, we are all working together very closely, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, everybody. So mainly it's the medical people who are the head of the pharmacy services also, just like in CMC. So any policy comes, any errors have to be informed. That's why we all should know about this. Identify medicines based on the name and strength and not by the appearance or location. Check the appropriate dose for the medicines dispensed, and medication labels should be read very carefully at the dispensing stages, and perform triangle check. Triangle check is the pharmacy and the order and the pharmacy doctor order and whatever is the prescribed, maybe it comes in the computer. This is from a developed country, so I'm not showing with the triangular check, but we can have our own way of checking to avoid the mistakes. Triangle check, okay, this is again medicine label and against the prescription. So this is quite okay to read. Double checking should be conducted during dispensing and supply process. Highlight changes in the medication appearances to patients upon dispensing. So these are the various dispensing cautions to be taken. Administration, sometimes, most of the time it's nurses, sometimes by doctors, and many times doctors are administering some of the drugs for pre-medication before procedures. So that's why it's important for everyone. Identify the medicines based on the name and the strength. If the nurse is loading and giving to the doctor, and doctor is ready to start some LP or bone marrow, whatever procedure, nurse must confirm and tell to the doctor that this is the medicine and what is the dosage, and make sure it is indicated. Check the appropriateness for the dose as well, and read the medication levels once again to avoid the confusion and knowing what is supposed to be administered to the child. Then triangle check, once again, check actual medicine and label and against the prescription. So what we do is here for administration, the nurse has to check the doctor's order, check the medicine label, and then check the patient hospital number in 3 other records: doctor's order sheet and the nurse's record and also the admission sheet. So we know that in all the 3 records that the number is clear, name and number is clear with the sticker. And many times we find that the sticker is not there. If the sticker is not there, it is all written in hands. So as far as possible, wherever the stickers are, that only should be used. Again, with the handwriting, it is transcribing the patient details, and that can lead to errors. So we insist that the nurses, before they give the medicines, if the label is not there, please ask the doctors to do it for everyone's safety. So even prescribing safety, administration safety. So these are all the safety checks we need to have in place. Next one, please.
We have 2 minutes to wrap up the session.
Okay. So anyway, so emphasize the need to read labels, check the labels, read back clarifications, and staff receiving verbal orders must repeat. Next slide, please. Monitoring, anyway, we can do the monitoring. We all know how to do it. Information to everyone and to the patient also, and the reporting system. And next one is patient education. Already I have informed this. Evaluating the medication error, find out root cause analysis, why, when, what, how, the different characteristics, generic brand name, dose strength, dose form, packaging, route frequency, instructions, storage requirements, indications, patient population, likely care environments, and any others. These are all characteristics we are just reinforcing at this time. Next one, risk assessment reduction. As we know how to assess the risk, find out what can go wrong, what, how, when, why, and to our junior people, and continuous reinforcement and teaching should be on, and evaluation. These are the list of drugs. Already we have seen what we use in ICU and any internet. So many look-alike, sound-alike lists are given, can be referred to. Next, please. This again, the same thing, sorry. Next one, next one. Yeah, again, these are the ones what we have here in CMC. Next one. Yeah, these are again another example list of drugs which we use in the wards and onco wards. Next one. Yeah. Yeah, this is important for us because it has happened. Cyclosporin was given instead of cycloserine. Lignocaine IV solution 2% was given as local anesthesia instead of the local injection route. And methylprednisolone was administered instead of methylene blue. So you can see how it can happen. So this also I would like you to know, CMC LASA, all medications are maintained with utmost care for safe access to LASA drugs. So this is all in related to the storage, dispensing, administration, reporting, everything, all those 6 points we had earlier seen. And this is the policy we are supposed to follow. List of LASA medications stored in the ward is prepared by the respective wards based on the global list on the intranet. And we have to refer the intranet, and every ward, ICU, HDU, casualty, oncology, general pediatrics, surgical, development pediatrics, every ward will have their own list. We need not have a whole list of drugs in each ward. Whatever is relevant for the ward and used in that ward only, the list should be prepared and kept. LASA drugs is stored separate boxes identified with eye and ear pictures, and you have seen at the different levels. All nurses in the wards are oriented and aware of LASA. This is related to nursing service policy. That's why it's mentioned at nurses. Double checking should be done for all the drugs, and that will also lead to prevention of LASA drug errors. Additional of any new LASA drugs are reported, and there's a change in global list. Whenever there's a change in global list, and it should be, the information should be disseminated to everybody, to the pharmacy, to the doctors, to the nurses, to the nursing students, to interns, to everyone. The dissemination of knowledge for LASA should be made aware to everyone. Next one, please. Yeah, take home message, orient and alert all healthcare team members, drug names, look alike, sound alike leads to potential harmful errors and serious consequence for patients, and anyone can make errors, as Mary ma'am had told. I'm just reinforcing. Respective strategies should be in place, like storage, labeling of LASA drugs, double checking, drug presentation, education to be ongoing, proactive and ongoing evaluation of all possible negative events. We had 3 incidents, and we have just made corrective actions so that, again, nurses should know what is the drugs which the nurses can go wrong. Risk assessment model approach should be in place as recommended by WHO and NAB. These are all accrediting bodies for patient safety. So thank you very much for giving me this time. Sorry if I've offshot the time.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, thank you for covering extensively the organizational and administrative policies that help ensure patient safety on respect to the drug safety and patient safety. So, are there any questions? I couldn't see any in the chat box. If anybody has any questions, the speakers would like to take.
So all the speakers, I'd like to congratulate because they have given an extensive and very informative talk. So that will be useful in preventing the medication errors in the ICU as well as in the wards. So what I could see difference between the other hospitals and the CMC Institute where I worked for 2 years. So each shift they have like a shift in charge. So who will be checking all the drugs infusions, especially whether they are administered in the correct dose or not. So checking in each shift that will decrease the chance of prescribing drug in a wrong dose.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Hope it would have been a very useful session for everyone. Thank you, Reshma and Sujit, for
Thank you for the
moderating the
opportunity.
session. Oh, it is our pleasure to have you guys, see you guys, and to have you as moderators. Thank you, Sister Ruma and Sister Mary, for covering everything and in detail, and Siva as well.